On Tech News Today, China steals more data from U.S. government employees. Google plans to kill Flash and Chrome, but only sometimes. And a search engine company from the 90s returns to launch 2 wearables. It's all coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Friday, June 5th, 2015. This episode is brought to you by ZipRecruiter. Are you hiring? With ZipRecruiter.com, you can post to 100-plus job sites, including social networks, all with a single click. Screen, rate, and hire the right candidates fast. Try ZipRecruiter with a free 4-day trial now at ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. And by Gazelle, the fast and simple way to sell your used gadgets. Find out what your used iPhone, iPad, and other Apple products are worth at Gazelle.com. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. My name is Mike Elgan. Welcome to the show. Our co-anchor today is Mashable Senior Tech Correspondent Christina Warren. How you doing, Christina?
I'm great. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing fantastic. Now, you are going to be sprinting out of here in about 25 minutes, 20 minutes or so, because you're going to be on Science Friday, one of NPR's science shows. That's going to be fun. What are you going to be talking about?
I'm going to be talking about kind of the good side and the bad side, the way that, you can ask a question on Google and it'll show you an answer in a fun little answer box. Well, one of the good sides and downsides of that is, like, it's great if you want to know what's the capital of Georgia. It'll show you Atlanta. But if you ask it what happened to the dinosaurs, it brings up a procreationist website that gives a procreationist answer for what happened to the dinosaurs. And so we're going to be kind of debating the merits and unmerits, I guess, as they were, of this sort of SEO-driven future.
It's a weird thing that Google has to do. They have to balance, they have to reflect what's actually out there. And sometimes creationist museums and things like that exist, and so they have to put that out there. This is one of the problems, by the way, with the coming wearable and the virtual assistant revolution. When you ask Google now a question, you ask Siri a question, you ask Cortana a question, it will give you an answer. But whose answer? Which answer? And so we're facing a new world where you don't get every single result ranked. You get one result. Basically, every search with mobile computing and virtual assistants is the "I'm feeling lucky" answer. And sometimes that can be kind of crazy. But I look forward to listening to your segment. That's a great show, and science is good. And it's really weird that sometimes Google will give you something that isn't quite science. Well, why don't we jump into the news? Our top story today, the Obama administration yesterday announced that a hack, supposedly originating in China, breached the personal data of at least 4 million current and former government workers. The data was housed at the Office of Personnel Management, which is charged with processing security clearances and federal employee records. The hackers targeted Social Security numbers and other personal information. Sean Gallagher writes for Ars Technica and joins us now. Welcome to you, Sean Gallagher.
Hey, Mike.
So how certain are we that this originated in China? This is a claim by the government. And what are the chances that if it was China, that it was the Chinese government itself?
Well, we don't have a lot of details on the actual attribution in terms of details from the government. But based on the length of the hack, it's most likely that it was a state actor. And we don't have anything in terms of the evidence they've presented so far that points directly to the Chinese government. But because of China's control over the internet there, the assumption is that any sort of an attack that came out of China would have had at least state tacit approval, if not state sponsorship.
So what is Einstein?
Einstein is the Department of Homeland Security's computer system for screening for attacks. It's basically a great big intrusion detection system, but it's based on filters for known attack vectors. So if you've got something that's a 0-day, or if it's something that hasn't been seen before, Einstein does not pick it up. So even though the Department of Homeland Security had installed Einstein on the government's networks generally across the civilian agencies, if it hadn't been set up for recognizing this sort of an attack, it would not have alerted anyone.
And so it would have just happened and nobody would have known. And it sounds like Einstein isn't as smart as Einstein.
Einstein only knows what you tell Einstein it should know. So it's not a predictive system. It's not an analytical system. There are some enhancements being made to it, but it's still light years ahead of what the government had before in civilian agencies, which was pretty much log monitoring, and that was about it.
Well, I apologize for the following question because it's one that you almost certainly cannot answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. The U.S., since the last series of attacks from Russia, from China, against the U.S. government, oftentimes, oddly enough, targeting the personal information of employees, again, there's been a new policy change by the Pentagon. The Pentagon came out and in a sort of breathtaking change of policy said that the U.S. government is going to embrace a Cold War strategy of deterrence through retaliation. They basically said that if anybody attacks, if a state sponsor, hacker or hackers attacks the U.S. government or even U.S. businesses, that the U.S. government will retaliate with hack attacks. So here's the question you can't answer, but I'm curious about your thoughts. If this turns out to have been proved to be a Chinese government attack, will the United States retaliate with more hacking?
Well, that's a really interesting question because I don't think they can really ever narrow down the attribution to the point where they can say without a doubt that the Chinese government sponsored it. But if they do, there's a limited number of things they can do to attack China in terms of response in kind. It's more likely that they would do things to try and follow the same things they did before, like indicting members of China's military for hacking or doing things with economic sanctions rather than actual military attack on their networks. But if they were to attempt to do those sorts of things, it's questionable whether they could find something of equal value in Chinese systems that they haven't already got access to. The NSA has done a lot to penetrate inside Chinese government and military networks over the past few years. The Edward Snowden files demonstrated that. So we've already hacked them to a great degree. The question is whether we would then go and target Chinese companies. I think since this was a government agency that was hacked and not a corporate target, that they would probably try to do something with a government agency, and the impact of that would not necessarily be the same as the impact of this, which is the exposure of 4 million individuals' personal information in a way that could be used against them for identity theft, financial fraud, and things like that. I think the IRS hack, well, it wasn't really a hack. It was using stolen data from other corporate breaches to go in and get IRS transcript data. That's a demonstration of one of the big problems with personal information leaks, is that that could be used for actual financial damage to the U.S. government and to individuals. And the information that was stolen in this attack could also be used for financial fraud, for creating false identities, for filing fraudulent tax returns and collecting refund checks for these federal employees who've been attacked. And I don't see how we do that against the Chinese government.
Yeah, so you talk about, how these compare to some of the kind of other recent attacks. I'm curious, what the value of this stuff is beyond simply to other governments, potentially beyond simply the financial value. Is some of these records apparently include military personnel? Is there value that could be in this that could be used for other types of attacks, do you think?
I'm not
other
certain.
Than strictly financial.
I'm not certain OPM records. I don't think the OPM records included military personnel information.
Okay.
OPM handles civilian agencies.
There were some records that included a 1.5 million or something like that military, and I'm not sure exactly whether they, there's a lot of people who are in the military who then go into government. So I think that maybe there's some
cross-pollination between military and civilian. So there are some people who will be affected. The thing here is that it gives the identities of government employees and personal information about where they live and their families and things like that. And so that makes those people targetable. And that's a major vulnerability. The information that was leaked could be used in any number of ways to go after individuals who have access to sensitive information in the U.S. government, with phishing attacks to get access to their credentials, to get deeper into U.S. networks. And it could also be used for any number of other reasons where you want to have personal information to either blackmail someone or cause them personal harm, threaten them with personal harm to get them to do something, coerce them into doing something for a foreign government. The previous hack that attacked OPM went after the background check contractor for the government. That's the organization, the commercial organization that was doing background investigations for security clearances. So the Chinese or whoever did that were able to collect information, deep background information on people who are getting clearances to very sensitive information in the U.S. government, and that's got obvious applications.
Well, I wonder if this includes any postal workers, because, of course, according to Newman on Seinfeld, whoever controls the mail controls information. Sean Gallagher is at arstechnica.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at the handle ThePackRat. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sean.
Thanks. It's the Packet Rat.
Packet Rat. Packet Rat. Yeah, not Pack Rat. Got it. That makes sense now. You're an IT guy. The Packet Rat. Thank you so much, Sean.
No problem. Take care.
Got more news for you in just a second, but let's talk about ZipRecruiter, one of our sponsors today. ZipRecruiter is going to save your bacon when it's time for you to hire people because, first of all, and most importantly, they're going to help you hire the very best person who you can hire. And secondly, they're going to save you a ton of time and a ton of money and a ton of hassle. And here's how they're going to do it. Basically, you put in your job, whatever you're doing for hiring, and you can post it to more than 100 job sites with a single click, and that includes social networks like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Google+. They'll also instantly match you to candidates in over 4 million resumes. ZipRecruiter is used by more than 400,000 businesses, and there's a very good reason for that. You can customize your jobs. They help you deal with the torrent of applications you're going to get. They'll separate the qualified from the unqualified and just give you the qualified ones so you don't have to waste your time. Twit uses ZipRecruiter, of course. We have a current job out there for a video editor. And this is what it looks like. You notice the Twit logo and branding at the top. You can do this for your company as well. They're not doing anything special for us there. And that's one of the great things about it. It looks very much of your site and of your company rather than a ZipRecruiter site. And so you can actually get your branding out there as well. And you also want to check out their blog, ZipRecruiter.com/blog. It's a really good blog for hiring advice. I want you to try ZipRecruiter today with a free 4-day trial and get your perfect candidate before they go to your competition. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. Remember, that's ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. Google's European chief executive, Matt Britton, said yesterday in an interview with Politico that Google has mishandled its messaging in Europe and wants to be BFFs again with the European Commission. Zoya Sheftalovich is a tech reporter for Politico Europe, and she was one of the journalists who conducted the interview. Welcome to you, Zoya.
Thanks, Mike.
Now, did Britton admit Google guilt, or is he saying that Google didn't communicate well enough about how right Google is?
Google has never admitted its guilt when it comes to the antitrust case from the European Commission, and I don't think they're going to anytime soon. What they did admit is that they got their communication strategy wrong. So Google has been in Europe for a while, but the way that they've been dealing with the European Commission and with the European authorities in other countries has been very American, and he accepted that that was a mistake.
So do you agree that that this is what this is, that they've failed to explain its policy to policymakers? Or do you think that maybe there's a fundamental clash of cultures between the way things are done in Europe and the way they're done in Silicon Valley?
There's absolutely a clash of cultures between the way things are done in Europe and Silicon Valley. And the reason for that largely is there are some cultural changes, some cultural differences, first of all, in terms of the way, for example, Europeans view their personal information, the way that they protect their privacy. There's also a really big difference in the type of regulation that exists. So in the States, there's a very low regulatory regime. The bar isn't very high. And so tech companies can innovate, they can come in, they can do many of the things that they want to do without interference from the government. In Europe, there are all sorts of regulatory regimes. First of all, there are 28 member states in the European Union. They each have their own regulation. And there's the European Commission, the European Parliament, the European Council. So the way that you deal with things and the way you deal with regulators in Europe is entirely different. And that's something that Google perhaps didn't catch on to early enough. They had this approach, as many tech companies do, where they go in, they ask for forgiveness later rather than asking for permission first.
Now, I'm not really familiar with this Matt Britton character. Is he primarily a lobbyist? What does he do for a living?
He is actually primarily a lobbyist. He's been with Google for quite some time. He's been there, I believe, 7 or 8 years, working in their London office. But it was earlier this year, around about February, that he was actually named Google's chief in Europe. And it is quite an interesting thing to think about, that in Europe, the chief of Google, he's not an engineer, he's not a tech guy. He is most definitely a lobbyist. He's an interesting character. He's an ex-competitive rower, very tall, quite strapping, quite charming and British. So I think they're certainly trying to attack it from that charm front at the moment.
Basically a Winklevi, but only one of them. Well, Zoya Sheftalovich, I don't expect you to respond to that. You're a really good journalist, so it's beneath you. Zoya Sheftalovich is at politico.eu, and you can follow her on Twitter at Zoya Shef. That's ZOYASHEF. Thank you so much for joining us today, Zoya.
It's a pleasure.
All right. Google and Adobe are working together to cut Chrome's battery drain. They're doing it by reducing the Flash content played automatically. Blair Hanley Frank writes for IDG and joins us now. Welcome to you, Blair.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. How are they figuring out, they being Google and Adobe, how are they figuring out what's important and what isn't in terms of Flash content? In other words, the idea is to intelligently turn things on and off in Flash to reduce battery drain, but how are they figuring out what's needed and what isn't?
Yeah, that isn't exactly clear. It's not perfectly understood what they're doing technically to figure this out, but what they're focused on is what content is central to the page. So stuff like the main video in the center of an article or on YouTube would continue to play. Of course, YouTube videos are no longer Flash-based, so but it would continue to play while something like a Flash advertisement that's off to the side, it's not a part of the main web content that someone's accessing, would be paused.
Just about battery life, or is this about memory consumption too? Because obviously, Flash can do, it's a big drain on battery life, especially on Macs and other platforms that might not have hardware acceleration for certain Flash content. But it can also arguably lead to memory drain. So is this primarily being done just for battery life, or are they hoping to reduce some of Chrome's enormous memory footprint?
Again, that's not something that Google has addressed, unfortunately. In their announcement and what they've been saying about the feature, this is primarily focused on battery drain. And if there are some memory benefits, which I bet there are, those are likely going to be incidental and useful to Chrome, but it's not something that Google is pushing right now.
If Flash is such a pig, why doesn't Google just stop supporting it like Apple did?
Because I think part of it is that Google tries to play a little bit nicer with web content that may not be not necessarily as useful, but as friendly across platforms. And the thing is that Apple can say, we don't like Flash. We're not going to bundle it with our computers, and we're not going to include it with our mobile devices, and everybody else can just deal. But Google is interested in sort of casting a wider net and having Chrome work out of the box, which is why they've been bundling a version of Flash Player with Chrome rather than relying on the built-in system Flash Player.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good point. Obviously, they want to have support for this stuff, and they support it, and Firefox does, although, its Linux Flash support is largely based on what Chrome does. But, the new version of Internet Explorer, Microsoft Edge, is not going to have Flash support. And it seems like what Google is doing is kind of implementing the popular Flash block plugin, or doing what Apple does with, its power saving mode on websites where it will automatically, pause Flash content. At what point do you think, I guess, guess just to kind of further iterate Mike's question, how long do you think Google is going to continue to support Flash if they're now going to this, taking this step of disabling parts of it so that it is, less of a memory hog, or less of a battery waster?
Yeah, I think Google is going to continue to support Flash for as long as it's necessary. And for right now, one of the major hurdles for them is that advertisers still run Flash ads. And because Google they make their money on ads, it's in their interest to continue supporting Flash in their browser. Now, they're trying to get advertisers away from Flash and onto HTML5 ads as much as possible. They've been updating AdWords to support HTML5 animations and HTML5 video more, so that advertisers can now actually upload Flash content and have that turned into an HTML5 ad. And they're soon going to have support for built-in HTML5 advertising campaigns. So I think that all of those features coming online and being used by a wider number of advertisers is going to be a big turning point in terms of whether or not Chrome will support it. If Google doesn't need Flash to show its ads, then they likely have less of an incentive to continue to support Flash. Obviously, it's not clear how long that lifetime is going to be. And Flash, for right now, is still useful. And so I don't think we're going to see them completely do away with it just yet.
Well, this is, of course, a technology show, and we try not to be useful to people. Twit has other shows that are useful. This one's informative but not useful. But I'll be useful for just this brief moment. If you struggle with the battery and memory drain caused by Chrome, I recommend something called the Great Suspender. I recommended it on Twig this week when I was on that as my pick of the week. The Great Suspender is a Chrome plugin that will essentially put tabs to sleep in an intelligent and flexible way. So you can go in and configure it any way you want, but once you've configured it, you can just forget about it. And your fan, in my case, my fan just stopped spinning because the Chrome was no longer gobbling up all the memory. And of course, it helps the battery life as well. Blair Hanley Frank is at idg.net, and you can follow him on Twitter at BELRIL. Thank you for joining us today, Blair.
Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks. So, Christina, I think you got a boogie, so have a great interview with the science geeks over there at NPR.
I will, and have a great rest of the show. Bye, guys.
All right, thank you. Thanks so much for coming on. Well, Lycos, of all companies, unveiled yesterday 2 wearable devices. No, I'm not kidding. If you recall, Lycos was a search engine from the 1990s. Scott Stein is a senior editor at CNET, and he joins us to explain what the heck is going on. Welcome to you, Scott.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Mike.
Thanks.
Yeah, I kind of did a double take when I got this email about Lycos, although it seems like everyone in the world, no matter who you are, has got some sort of wearable in the works. So, welcome to the circus.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I sort of rubbed my eyes. I looked again when I got that invite. Quite an odd turn of events. Now, what are these wearables that Lycos announced?
Well, there are 2, and they were leaked on the website, and then there was this webcast that was very strange the other day. One is a band, and one is a ring. Now, the band, they're both called the band and the ring, and they're part of this Lycos Life launch suite of potential products in the future. The band is a fitness band. Actually has a pretty decent feature set. $125 puts it in the basic ballpark. Heart rate monitoring, automatic sleep tracking, step count, like an OLED type display. The difference here is it also has NFC built in. So does the ring, and it can do tap to transfer, which means that you could share information via NFC. And it also, they're emphasizing personal security. So you can manage your passwords with this Lycos Life app between the ring and the band, with more information coming soon. The launch is, I think, June 8th. And this is a global company. Well, I'll get to that in a moment. But the band is one thing. The ring at $60 has no battery. It just has NFC in it, 2 chips that will enable you to store information and again, tap to transfer. That's kind of cool tech, this NFC technology. But, what does it have to do with Lycos, and particularly the password security stuff seems a little odd.
Yeah, they have to overcome the insurmountable hurdle that people don't want to buy jewelry from Lycos. Now, you started to talk about Lycos, the company. What have they been doing for the last 15 years? What's the status of this company?
Well, I was trying to piece it out on the website, as I've not been a Lycos historian really, but I remember it from the days of, Clinton and when I went to grad school for theater many years ago. So, they have come back. It was acquired in 2010 by this company called Ebrant Digital, and they explained this in the WebEx conference that they were acquired. So they're using the Lycos name for a lot of the company. It's largely a global marketing company in 24 different global regions. So, take that as you will. I kind of feel like once you think about this as a marketing company and they're talking about Internet of Things, they claim this is going to be 2 products in a massive range of connected products, which again, who hasn't been throwing that around? That's, a little strange. And as far as the password security stuff goes, going back to that, I think that they're suggesting that part of it might be in the cloud. And you just have a lot of password security managing software already. And if you're going to deal with a company to manage it, you probably go with a big company that you might recognize that could explain a little more about what they're doing with those passwords.
Okay, so very briefly, what is Lycos Life Project? What is this initiative?
Right, so that's another part, as if it doesn't get already a little confusing here. They announced that they're launching a nonprofit humanitarian initiative, Lycos Life. I believe it's nonprofit, Lycos Life Project. This is going to be trying to reach out to people with this is an interesting initiative in theory to give people free water and air quality sensors so that they could share that information in a global context, but also use it for themselves so that you can know about in areas where you may not know about the water or air quality, help people out and have some environmental benefit. They're saying that 5% of the sales of these Lycos Life bands and rings will go towards this. There's going to be a big party with it. The problem is that, again, these are unknown quantity products. So 5% of those mysterious products go to this mysterious effort. Not that initiative doesn't sound, potentially very useful. And it sounds like there was some email about a party where there were a lot of celebrities at least looped into that. That's a nice idea. I kind of feel like, could that exist without having to bring up the band and the ring, which are not insignificantly priced? Maybe you want to have something a little more affordable and use that to lead off the initiative versus launching what seems like a real attempted contender in the wearables market, which feels odd.
It certainly does feel odd. It all feels odd, but I'm with you. I think that sounds like a very worthwhile effort. We'll see if they can resurrect themselves as a wearable company and also a philanthropic organization. Scott Stein is at cnet.com. You can follow him on Twitter at JetScott. Thank you so much for joining us today, Scott.
Hey, thank you.
All right. We told you yesterday that PayPal changed their user agreement to give themselves permission to spam you with robocalls and spam texts with no opt-out other than closing your PayPal account. After everybody freaked out, PayPal has reversed itself and says they'll now offer customers the option to opt out, and that sounds very, very sensible, although I'm not really clear on why they wanted to get into the spamming racket in the first place. Well, in product obituary news, Yahoo announced yesterday that it's closing off several products and sites, including Yahoo Maps, Yahoo Pipes, and 2 APIs, GeoPlanet and Place Spotter. They're closing some regional sites as well, and the company also announced the end of support for some older versions of Yahoo Mail and Yahoo Contacts. And this is what Yahoo does. They close companies, they buy companies. I think between the years 2012 and 2014, they closed something like 60 products. I mean, it's really amazing how many products they've closed. Well, in mergers and acquisitions news, 2 concert-related companies, the concert discovery app maker Songkick and the ticket seller CrowdSurge, have merged. The newly combined company takes the name Songkick, and the merger is a 50-50 stock split. That's hard to say, stock for stock split. And there it is, a new super site for concerts. And if you think concerts are a subset of the music industry, think again. Concert revenue is vastly higher than the revenue from downloads and streaming music. So the big money in music is actually in the concert. So these companies are in a position to make a ton of money, and they don't have to compete with the likes of Apple for that concert revenue. Well, we got some more news for you in just a minute, but first, let's talk about one of my favorite companies in all the world, Gazelle. Now, here's why it's one of my favorite companies. First of all, they help me get the best gadget I possibly can, and they do it in two ways. The first one is that they will buy my old gadgets. You know, I like to upgrade to the new hotness, and so I just take the old and busted, throw it in a box, and send it off to Gazelle, and they will send me always a surprising amount of money, a lot of money for my old gadgets. And of course, if your device is in great shape, you always want to keep your phone in a case, and one reason is that when you sell it back to Gazelle, you get top dollar for it. And then when you take that money and you can buy your next gadget from Gazelle, they'll give you a better price that you can get for a brand new gadget by selling you one that's just like new, but is less expensive. They have a certified like new category of phone that will, it'll be like significant discount over a brand new phone. The way I like to look at it is not that it's a less expensive phone, but that you, for the same budget, can get a much better phone. You can get the top of the line phone for the same price as a mid-range phone. That's how great their prices are. So you always want to sell to Gazelle. You always want to buy from Gazelle. Of course, it's just easy to check it out. And it's fun, too. They have a great site. Just go to GAZELLE, that's 2 L's, .com, and check out what they have and what you can buy and what you can sell. Find out what your iPhone's worth. Take a minute and go to gazelle.com to find out. We got two big numbers for you today, 512. That's how many gigabytes of data fit into a new micro SD card from Microdia. That's right, a 0.5 terabyte micro SD card. Unbelievable. Okay, another big number, 1,000. That's approximately how many dollars you're going to spend for the Microdia micro SD card. Yeah, it's $1,000 for micro SD card. But that's not a bad price. I think the regular SD card at that same storage level costs about $800. So that's actually a pretty good price for such a tiny card. Well, our TNT fan of the day is Fluffy Goldfish Labs. They said that this picture shows them listening to me on Tech News Today, accusing them of photoshopping their last fan of the day pic, which they said was them listening to the show while piranha fishing in the Amazon. Here they say they're listening to the show while chillaxing at Machu Picchu. I'm not buying any of it. I think this one's a Photoshop too, but they do listen to the show, clearly, because they heard my accusation. How do you watch or listen to TNT? Just record a video or take a picture or take a selfie or take a Vine video or take an Auto Awesome or take something and post it on Google+, Twitter, or Facebook, or Instagram, or anywhere, and use the hashtag HowIWatchTNT so we can find it. You can subscribe to Tech News Today on YouTube. Just find our YouTube channel there on YouTube. Easy to find. Just search for Tech News Today. Or you can choose some other way to subscribe at twit.tv/TNT. You can also watch us live every weekday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1800 UTC at live.twit.tv. You can follow us on Twitter at Tech News Today TV. You can follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/Mike.Elgan. And don't miss Tech News Tonight at 4 p.m. Pacific every single weeknight. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the Tech News Today. This show was produced by Jason Cleanthes and edited by Brian Burnett. My name is Mike Elgan. Note that we air live on Monday 1 hour early at 9 a.m. Pacific, because at 10 a.m., please join us for our special coverage of the Apple Worldwide Developers Conference with Leo, of course, as well as Andy Anatko, Georgia Dow, and me. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday.